We noticed how much you guys liked the last one, so we're back at it again with some crazy stuff. Maybe my Bonnie is waiting in the comments. I'm your host Yusuf, and these are 10 things Bonnie and Clyde have said. Make sure you subscribe and ring that bell to get notified whenever we upload a new video. Anyways, we're blasting off again! Number 10, what Clyde said to Bonnie's mom when they were all over the newspapers. Now, Miss Parker, don't you believe what you read in all them newspapers. That's the law talking there. They want us to look big, so they gonna look big when they catch us. And they ain't gonna catch us. Clyde had a spotty relationship with Bonnie at times. Even before their crime spree, Clyde made it clear that he ain't no lover boy, in his own words. He absolutely wasn't, for a while. I mean, one thing that probably brought them closer and further apart at the same time was their shared limp. Clyde would walk with a limp because of something really stupid he did when he was thrown in the slammer. While serving a 14-year sentence in Texas for robbery and automobile theft in January 1932, Clyde decided he could no longer endure the unforgiving work and brutal conditions at the notoriously tough Eastham Prison Farm. In the hopes of forcing a transfer to a less harsh facility, Clyde severed his left big toe and a portion of his second toe with an axe, although it is not known whether he or another person wielded the sharp instrument. The self-mutilation, which permanently crippled his walking stride and prevented him from wearing shoes while driving, ultimately proved unnecessary, as he was released on parole 6 days later. On the night of June 10th, 1933, Clyde, with Bonnie in the passenger seat, was speeding along the rural roads of North Texas so quickly that he missed a detour sign warning of a bridge under construction. The duo's Ford V8 smashed through a barricade at 70 miles per hour and sailed through the air before landing in a dry riverbed. Scalding acid poured out of the car battery and severely burned Bonnie's right leg, eating away at her flesh down to the bone in some places. As a result of the third-degree burns, Bonnie, like Clyde, walked with a pronounced limp for the rest of her life, and she had such difficulty walking that at times she hopped or needed Clyde to carry her. So, he was the reason she could never walk the same again, but also now they at least share something in common, right? Number 9, when Clyde said the papers were lying. Shoot, if we'd done half that stuff they said we'd done in the paper, we'd be millionaires by now, wouldn't we? The myth about Bonnie and Clyde, portrayed in the 1930s, surely until now, is often understood to be the fact of how they acted and were active in the area. The myth promotes the idea of a romantic couple in stylish clothes who broke the bonds of convention and became a threat to the status quo, who didn't fear the police and lived a life of glamorous luxury outrunning them. The reality was different though. Sometimes stupid, often careless, Bonnie and Clyde and the Barrow Gang lived a hard, uneasy life, punctuated by narrow escapes, ruined robberies, injury, and execution. They became one of the first outlaw media stars after some photos of them fooling around with guns were found by police, and the myth-making machine began to work its transformative magic. Soon fame would turn sour and their lives would end in a bloody police ambush, but their dramatic and untimely end would only add luster to their legend. The myths surely gave birth to a misconception that the two were making off with thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars from their robberies, which promptly peeved off the pair as they were making their escape from the law. This definitely didn't help in their attempts to flee, as since the newspapers propagated a public menace roaming the streets, robbing banks and taking lives, the police had to be active and quick for their search and apprehendment or destruction of the fugitives. If not swift, the police would face backlash from the public and questions asking why they aren't trying hard enough. Surely, Clyde knew that fact all too well when he said those words earlier. Number 8, ride or try. You know what I want to say instead of try, I just can't say it because of YouTube know who breathing on my neck. Miss Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow are best known for robbing banks, small-time stores, and gas stations, and perhaps they're the best known pair of criminals from the 1920s to 1930s. While Bonnie and Clyde may not have a catchphrase that I'm aware of, they're perhaps best remembered by the poems that Bonnie wrote. Clyde also lent his hand to a few poems, but most likely this was just to please Bonnie. It was Bonnie who loved writing poems. She even sent a few to local newspapers who were only too happy to print them. I mean, imagine the exposure. One poem ends, "I'll never leave your side, my dear Clyde. I'll ride till I try." This is where the ride or try quote came from. So all of you watching who are looking for your so-called ride or try, you can credit Bonnie Parker for her genius writing skills. If not for her, you wouldn't have your classic phrase to say after all. Number 7, a threat from the mother. This one is coming from Bonnie's mother, but I'm still counting it because it's important for the context of the relationship between the criminal duo. After telling Bonnie's mother, Emma Parker, not to listen to the newspapers, Clyde went on to say that Bonnie wouldn't want to live too far from her mama, and explained Bonnie's plan to live 3 miles away from her maternal figure. Emma was never a fan of Clyde. She always disagreed with their relationship, and her response to Bonnie and Clyde moving into their neighborhood, "You'll be shot if you live 3 miles away from me, Clyde Barrow." Ouch. Right up until the day she passed away, Emma Parker refused to let Bonnie and Clyde be buried together. Instead, Clyde was buried in a shared grave with his brother, and Bonnie was buried somewhere else in Texas. How did Clyde's mother feel about Bonnie though? Clyde Barrow's mother, Kumi, denied that she had ever met Bonnie Parker, but facts show that this wasn't true. In fact, it was Kumi Barrow who helped the Lovebirds stay on the run for so long. After Bonnie's leg was badly burned in the car accident mentioned before, Kumi helped find a doctor who could write a prescription for laudanum to help Bonnie deal with the pain. The prescription was made out to and picked up by Kumi's niece. Kumi also helped the pair by buying them clothes and packing food for the outlaws. She always knew when they were coming because someone would throw a bottle against the fence that contained a note with phrases that would only mean something to Kumi. While there's no record of it, many assume that Clyde would give money to his mother. Kumi Barrow would then bribe local police, perhaps to ignore their house on the days that Clyde and Bonnie would visit. After Bonnie and Clyde had been executed, Kumi was arrested for aiding and abetting criminals. She denied everything but was found guilty. During sentencing, the judge literally asked Kumi if 60 days sounded fair. Number 6, what Bonnie said about the relationship. "They may hate us together, but they can't stop us," uttered Bonnie to Clyde. What was Bonnie's take on their relationship though? Well, let's take a dive into her previous relationship and see where we end up. 6 days before turning 16, Bonnie married high school classmate Roy Thornton. The marriage fell apart quickly within months, and Bonnie never saw her husband after he was imprisoned for robbery in 1929. It seems like Bonnie had a thing for bad boys. Soon after, Bonnie met Clyde, and although the pair fell in love, she never divorced Thornton. On the day Bonnie and Clyde were removed from the world in 1934, she was still wearing Thornton's wedding ring and actually had a tattoo on the side of her right thigh with 2 interconnected hearts labeled Bonnie and Roy. Although she was now with Clyde and deeply in love, she could probably see that the two weren't getting along as she hoped. His refusal of her wild advances is so stern it's not only jarring, it's completely at odds with the persisting image of the young couple. 2 kids wildly in love as they throw all caution to the wind on their criminal rampage. In the scene in the Bonnie and Clyde movie, which takes place after their first robbery together, Bonnie is completely enthralled. She's high on the thrill of it, and as Clyde makes their getaway, she kisses him passionately as they drive. It's exactly the kind of scene you'd expect. But Clyde immediately flips the script, tossing Bonnie aside as he tells her that that's simply not who he is. Clyde was not all into that lovey-dovey stuff. Number 5, Clyde's poem. Bonnie was generally the more poetic and literate one of the pair, but Clyde did begrudgingly offer up a few poems for himself. Here's one of them. "We don't want to hurt anyone, but we have to steal to eat. And if it's a shootout to live, that's the way it will have to be. We have kidnapped some people and tied them to a tree, but not so tight that after we were gone, they could not get themselves free. We are going home tomorrow to look in on the folks. We will meet then out near Grapevine if the laws don't get there first. Now that's not as good as Bonnie's, so I guess I will call it a flop. But please God, just one more visit before we are put on the spot." You would probably look at the similarities between Bonnie's poems and Clyde's poems and outright cross out his penmanship, and on the actual grammatical side, I agree. However, the content of the poem here is actually pretty good in my opinion. He wants to see this one spot near Grapevine before the police find them and take them out, even praying to God that they can visit it one more time before they depart from this world and on to the next. Funny enough, he actually makes fun of himself in the poem too. He says his poem's not as good as Bonnie's and that he calls his own writing skills a flop. Don't be so hard on yourself, Clyde. It's hard to write under pressure, especially when the pressure is the police. Number 4, what Clyde told his mother about working. "Mama, I'm never gonna work again. And I'll never stand arrest either. I'm not ever going back to that Eastham hellhole. I'll pass away first. I swear it. They're gonna have to end me." Clyde must have had a massive disdain for the authority in his town and the prison they kept him in, because him saying he'd rather pass away than spend another day in prison is a big thing to say. It makes sense once you realize what he did when imprisoned, actually. Let's see why he was sent to jail in the first place though. The notorious criminal Clyde Champion Barrow was first arrested in 1926 for automobile theft after failing to return a car he had rented in Dallas to visit an estranged high school girlfriend. The rental car agency dropped the charges, but the incident remained on Clyde's arrest record. Just 3 weeks later, he was arrested again alongside his older brother Ivan Buck Barrow for an even more farcical crime: possession of a truckload of stolen turkeys. The turkeys, turns out, were stolen, and both brothers were arrested after cops found out. Clyde didn't go to jail that time at least, but the incident earned him a reputation. Number 3, Clyde knew they'd get caught eventually. On the road with Bonnie, Clyde uttered these chillingly sad words: "You and me traveling together, we could cut a path clean across this state and Kansas and Missouri and Oklahoma and everybody'd know about it." It seems he really just accepted the fact that their faces and deeds would be all over the country by that time. There was nowhere they'd be really actually safe from the police. In recent studies, some scientists and psychologists suggest that Clyde had a mental illness called antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial personality disorder is a particularly challenging type of personality disorder characterized by impulsive, irresponsible, and often criminal behavior. Someone with antisocial personality disorder will typically be manipulative, deceitful, and reckless, and will not care for other people's feelings. These traits are seen in Clyde's behavior during his spree with Bonnie, but at least here he gave her a subtle warning that they would probably end up gone. Number 2. What did Bonnie's original husband say about the two being executed in the street? While Bonnie had gotten married a few years before, she spent only a few months with her husband before he was sent to jail in 1929. Bonnie never saw him again. She met Clyde in January of 1930, but shortly after, Clyde was arrested for car theft. It was Bonnie who had smuggled a gun into the jail and on one of her visits helped Barrow escape. Clyde was recaptured rather quickly and was sent back to prison. When he was finally released from prison, he and Bonnie hooked up together immediately. Not that he seemed to mind. Bonnie Parker's husband, Roy Thornton, heard that Bonnie and Clyde had been shot. He is quoted as saying, "I'm glad they jumped out when they did. It's much better than being caught." Were the criminals really in love though? Well, only the long gone couple could answer this question, but it seems pretty clear that they were, at least later on. Number 1, Bonnie's poem On the Run. This last quote hits a bit hard for me, and let me know if it does for you guys too in the comments below. If a policeman is ended in Dallas and they have no clue or guide, if they can't find a fiend, they just wipe their slate clean and hang it on Bonnie and Clyde. There's 2 crimes committed in America not accredited to the Barrow mob. They had no hand in the kidnap demand, nor the Kansas City depot job. A newsboy once said to his buddy, "I wish old Clyde would get jumped. In these awful hard times, we'd make a few dimes if 5 or 6 cops would get bumped." The police haven't got the report yet, but Clyde called me up today. He said, "Don't start any fights, we aren't working nights, we're joining the NRA. From Irving to West Dallas Viaduct is known as the Great Divide, where the women are kin and the men are men, and they won't stool on Bonnie and Clyde. If they try to act like citizens and rent them a nice little flat, about the 3rd night they're invited to fight by a sub-gun's rat-a-tat-tat. They don't think they're too smart or desperate. They know that the law always wins. They've been shot at before, but they do not ignore that demise is the wage of sin. Someday they'll go down together. They'll bury them side by side. To few it'll be grief, to the law relief, but it's demise for Bonnie and Clyde." Now that's a brutal ending for their story, but it was pretty accurate. Hope I don't end up like that. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and comment if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time on Crime Time, where I, next time, will have a girlfriend. Probably not though.
Thank you.